I didn't have anyone modeling healthy love to me. My mother and I have deeply healed our relationship. It took a lot of time because when people are not willing to see themselves, it is so challenging. The healing that I'm doing is healing our lineage, but it's also healing our ancestors. And I see my mom and my grandmother thinking about what the past looks like for them. What are they holding that's not theirs? Like, it took me and my mom a really long time to see each other as women and not just mother and daughter, which completely shifted how we healed together. If I had to be the one to start the healing, then so be it. Because I'm looking at my almost 15-year-old. She's sensitive. She's compassionate. I look at my 4-year-old who takes deep breaths when she gets too fired up. I look at my 3-year-old who's like, hey, Isla, it's okay to cry. You're my best friend. Let's breathe. There is the healing.
Well, hello there, and welcome to this episode of The Terri Cole Show, where I am interviewing the author, Elle. We have an amazing conversation. She has a new book out called How We Heal, Uncover Your Power, and Set Yourself Free. She is so inspiring to me. I actually I found her on Instagram, I think through my friend Latham Thomas. And I just really vibed with what her message was, all about healing and self-healing, like getting on this path to healing. She's an amazing writing teacher. She's a best-selling author, an influential well-being teacher focused on helping others find their voice and create clarity in their lives and in their relationships. You've probably seen her. She's been around Good Morning America. She's done a bunch of TV shows. But in How We Heal, which is the book that we talked about in her process and her backstory, she basically is teaching us how to rewrite our narratives, right? Guiding us on a life-changing journey to kind of begin again, to give ourselves permission to grow and to heal not only ourselves, but generations after us, which I found so inspiring. Her work really, really lights me up. So I hope that you guys enjoy this interview with Elle as much as I enjoyed interviewing her. I'm super excited to welcome Alex to the show. Well, hi.
Hey, I am so happy to be here. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. I'm so incredibly excited for this book, for what you're doing, to have you on the show. So let's talk a little bit. If I could start with a little bit of your own backstory of like what brought you to where you are and what you're teaching, which is all about, as your book title is, How We Heal.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. In a nutshell, I am so passionate about healing because I was so broken for so long. And my backstory is I grew up feeling really unloved, really unsure, really misguided. And I had a child at 18. I have 3 daughters now. But my first child was born, I was 18, and I decided then that I would have to change, that I wanted to change, not just for her, but for me, that I wanted to start breaking cycles. I had no idea how to do it. Nobody was leading the way for me. I often say that I'm the matriarch of healing for my lineage, and that can feel really big and heavy at times. But now I really look at it more of like this honor to be able to not only heal for myself, but also heal for my 3 daughters and the people I teach. And it's interesting how we grow through the things that can knock us down. We're not taught that we can get back up again. And knowing that I had to make that decision and then figure out how to do it was really the turning point for me. Like, oh, I have to be the ruler of my life right now. At 18, I didn't have that language. At 33 now, I have that language.
Right.
But it's just interesting, like, as I look back on my story and where I've been and all of those things, it's like, wow, I chose myself for the first time in my life all those years ago, and I had no idea that that's what I was doing.
Wow. So what was the process like for you? Was it books? Was it therapy? How did you find your way? Because you're right. We do grow through like these sort of breakdowns where we're stuck because we do get up. But for you, what did it look like?
It looked like going to therapy for the first time as a young adult. And I had this I've always been a writer. I'm the only child, so I grew up writing stories, recording them on a little karaoke machine, and just, just being corny in that way. And then high school, writing really sad poetry and just doing that whole emo vibe, right? But I met this amazing therapist named Dr. B. She told me, why don't you start writing to be nice to yourself? why don't you put your journal in your imaginary emotional toolbox and find a way to really be kind to yourself, because you're not very good at that. And she was the first person to invite me to love myself. And when
Wow.
I started writing to heal, everything changed. Everything changed. Not all at once, but slowly. I thought it was dumb. I'm like, I want you want me to write love letters to myself. You want me, that's not going to heal me. I have so much stuff happening. Like, that's not going to work. I'm too broken
Yep.
to love myself. And she reminded me that I could love myself back together. To get that gift at 19, 20 years old, when you have been a lost soul for most of your life, not only did she give me my power back, but she told me that healing was possible in her own
Right.
way. So that's how it
Wow.
started.
And part of, I think, what is so compelling about your work is its accessibility. Listen, you have over 1.3 million people following you on Instagram. So it's not just me who feels this way, but there is a truth. I was just watching something the other day that you had, which is like, when somebody wants to leave your life, let them go. No fuss, no fighting. Like, stop with all of the trying to control it all and just allow. And there was something that was just so simple, beautiful, but truthful about that. And I feel that way about so many of the things. I can't wait to get into the book itself. But let's talk about healing as an invitation to nurture ourselves like we do everyone else.
Oh
That's a
my
quote from you. So
goodness.
talk about
Oh
it.
my gosh. So I had someone ask me recently, define healing. Like, what does that mean for you? To me, healing means to radically choose yourself and advocate for yourself. That is what healing is for me. And so being in this place of like, in order to heal, I have to release. I have to release control. And control is a trauma response for me. I grew up in a very controlling household, and it's interesting what we learn from our parents who are unhealed, right? The things we take with us. And so standing in my power has looked like advocating for myself by way of healing and not making it hard. Like, we hear and read so much about dismantling pain and trauma and breaking cycles, and very few people are telling us how to do that. And not telling us because they're the expert, but telling us because they've walked through it. And that's what I really want people to understand when they read my work and when they take courses with me and they're in retreat with me. It's like, Alex isn't preaching at me. She is sharing her own stories with me, and I can take what works and leave what doesn't. I can take what sticks and leave what doesn't. And I think that's what a true teacher is. When you
Agreed.
can lead by example and share your experiences without making people feel lost or like they can't touch the healing that you've touched.
Right, right. And also being a fellow seeker, right? I mean, think
Yes.
about those of us who do this work from that point of view, is that we're all sort of journeying together. People are at different places on their
Mm-hmm.
journey, but you're sharing where you are, which really does provide some kind of a roadmap or a GPS. And the thing that strikes me the most about the work is that it inspires hope in a lot of spaces that can be really hopeless. But I know what you mean about teachers who set themselves up in a particular way, that there's a looking down on people who are trying to learn as if you won't do it as good as I did, or I'm the final word. Because as a psychotherapist, I always think and say, like, we don't know what's going to work for other people. We
Yes.
have an idea. We can say, hey, in 25 years as a psychotherapist, this particular intervention has helped 93% of the people.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
Mm-hmm.
it will help you. But again, if it doesn't, that doesn't mean there's something wrong with them or that the advice is bad. It's having an open mind to the whole process itself, you know?
Yes. Yes. I resonate with that so deeply. And the first thing I say when people come to retreat with me, I say, if you're here to find your answers, I don't have them. You are your own greatest teacher.
Yep.
And that is how, I mean, I love starting class that way because it immediately disarms people from thinking that they're going to sit and learn from me instead of sit and learn with me.
Yeah. That's a really powerful distinction, though, because again, it's empowering the person. Like you have what you need, right?
Mm.
You just have to find it. And I feel like really good teachers are like excellent GPSs to the information that the folks who want to heal, what they need from themselves, because we're also incredibly unique. You talk quite a bit about like having an inner mean committee or an inner caustic voice or punitive voice, always just talking so badly about ourselves and about our stories. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of the stories that we tell ourselves?
Mm. I mean, we live with ourselves. We have to be our own friend and a good friend. I spent many years just being terrible to myself, talking down to myself, shaming myself, guilting myself. And what I realized is that it kept me stuck in cycles that I said I wanted to break. Maybe, Alex, be nice to yourself and just see what happens. Just see what happens. If you shift that language, yeah, I may have messed up or I may have made the wrong decision, but I'm still lovable. Or I can forgive myself for that thing that I did 10 years ago. I don't have to hold myself hostage to my past. I often feel like we learn how to do that in childhood. Things are hung over us, and I grew up feeling really unloved and kind of like love was conditional from my
Mm.
caretakers. And so I was always feeling like never good enough and never
Hmm.
seen enough and never held enough. And because of that, that's what I thought my truth was. And so I would continue to reiterate that to myself. With each birth of my daughters, I feel like
Hmm.
there's a whole rebirth that happens every child. I realized where I still felt broken and ashamed and guiltful. And with each child, I have been able to, or I am learning to, hold myself and my inner child in this new and more healthy way,
Hmm.
especially as I try to break cycles and dismantle some of the pain that my lineage has carried. Like, how do we do things differently? And that starts by giving ourselves grace and being open and honest with where we get it right and where we get it wrong.
I feel like with the internalized negative self-talk, let's say, there's a combination of the whys. But sometimes I've seen in therapy and in life that it's an internalized other, we call it, where it's literally you might live with someone who's very punitive or judgmental or mean,
Hmm.
and you may not live with them anymore, and then you just pick up where they left off. It's like you don't even realize. So many of my therapy
Mm.
clients, I would say, hey, that's literally not even your voice. Like,
Mm.
who is that? You would never talk,
Oh my
right?
gosh. I'm so sorry. I'm
No.
just so fired up because you said that, because I have asked myself, whose voice is that? Is that
Mm.
your voice? Is that you, or is that your mom? Is that you, or is that your ex? Whose voice is that? So, yes. Sorry
It's
to
just
cut you
so,
off.
it's no, no, not at all. It's just so powerful, though. These may sound like, like small actions, but they're not. They're actually life changing actions when you can just simply disavow that voice and say, it isn't me and it isn't true. Right? It isn't true. So you talk quite a bit also about value. So give me your 2 cents on self-worth, basically.
My 2 cents on self worth. I think, and I know that some people may think this is cheesy, but I truly think that we are all worthy and deserving of love and comfort and feeling safe, seen, and supported, no matter who raised us, what we've walked through, and where we're going. When you grow up feeling unworthy, dismantling that is really, really hard. It's like trying to learn a whole new language. Something that I've tried to do is love myself and remember my worth even through the hard stuff. It's easy to do that, when things are easeful and great and amazing. But how about when shit hits the fan, pardon my French?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are you going to beat yourself up over that? Or are you going to remember that you're human and you mess up and you're still worthy?
Yep.
You're human, that relationship failed, and you're still worthy. Like, I think for me, it's the balancing of the and still.
It's so powerful, though, to not be like, I used to be a talent agent, and, actors would feel like, they were only as valuable as their last movie or their last, whatever the thing was. And I'm like, you are inherently valuable. I totally agree with you and don't think that's corny at all. I think it's true. And part of it is look at, when your daughters were born, right? You look at that little face. How could you possibly think that a newborn is not worthy of everything, of all of the things that we should all be working really hard to give them a better life experience than most of us had, like with our own parents? And so I think there's something very powerful in remembering who we are. Like you said, remembering you are that little face. You were that little face at one point, and you're still that little face, even though you're grown up. And that little kid is still completely 1,000% worthy of love and grace. As you said, and I gotta say, with my demographic and the people who are drawn to my work, I find that giving ourselves grace is one of the hardest actions to take.
Yes. Yes. We are so quick to extend grace outside of ourselves. But when it's our turn, it's like, oh no, I don't deserve that. I'm not worthy of that. And that negative self-talk and that inner critic comes and taps us on the shoulder and distracts us from giving ourselves grace, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just taught at a leadership conference this week, and we were speaking of how do we give ourselves the same grace that we extend to others? That comes from remembering our worth. You're just as worthy as your children. You're just as worthy as the man or woman that you love. You're just as worthy as the people in your sphere who get your love, care, and attention. And a big part of my work is inviting people to lead by example. So something that I always say is that I don't want anyone to love me who doesn't love themselves. I don't want anyone to think I'm worthy and that they're not, because that means that they're pouring from a depleted place. I want the people who love me to love themselves and have this overflow that they can share with me. And I think that begins with grace. That begins with grace and understanding that we are worthy even when things are really challenging in life.
I love that so much. I don't want anyone to love me who doesn't love themselves. Part of what I've seen, like at the end of that, people who they get their value from what they do for others. They get their value from aggrandizing the importance of the other people in their life and putting them up on a pedestal. But if you watch that over decades and through sort of generations, there's only one place that it ends up going, which is bitter land, because there's only so long that you can pour from an empty cup. And even if the other person is grateful and does appreciate you, nobody can be grateful enough to fill that gap. You know what I mean? Because it's coming from a disordered place. So even if you're like, thank you and I appreciate it, there'll always be a running narrative of the person who's overgiving that is like, they're entitled, they're this, they're that. And again, you are so right in saying, turning the focus on healing ourselves, healing our own wounds, so that we can fall madly and deeply in love with ourselves, then sets us up to be in more equitable relationships with other people, right?
Yes. 150,000%. And that's why the tagline of how we heal is when we heal ourselves, we heal our lineage. When we heal ourselves, we heal each other.
Yes.
So the healing starts from the ground up. And I think I also want people to realize, like, you're not always going to feel like you love yourself. You're not always going to feel worthy. And that's where the work is, right? Like, how do we self-soothe through those moments, through those down moments, and remember that even if things aren't feeling lovey-dovey with self or worthy, that we can still give ourselves the grace and the space to be like, okay, why am I feeling this way? Whose voice is this? And remembering who we are. Like, that is
Right.
so important and valuable. And I love how you were speaking about equitable relationships, because when I started healing and truly loving myself, my relationships, they just became top tier. And the ones that weren't in alignment fell off, but the ones that were in alignment deepened in this really healthy, beautiful way.
Wow, that's so amazing. It's I love how you just described that, because it's exactly what happens as you evolve and become more discerning about who's going to get the privilege of being in your one and only amazing life. Like, it's a privilege to be in your life. Every single person watching, listening, you have to know that it's a privilege to be in your life. And I think that the people who didn't feel that way, or, with my clients, if we're talking about getting better boundaries, because I know you talk about boundaries as well, and how there's so much fear if I create healthier boundaries or if I assert a preference or whatever it is, that I'm going to lose people, or I'm being selfish, or I'm being mean. And what do you find happens when you start establishing boundaries in relationships from your point of view and what you've seen with the work that you do?
So boundaries were really hard for me, and I had to set them with family first. Actually, I'm going to rephrase that. I had to set them with myself first and then with family, right? And so a lot of my talk around boundaries is about honoring the boundaries that we set for ourselves. A lot of times we think boundaries is solely this external thing, but a lot of times people are not honoring our boundaries because we don't honor our boundaries. And I worked with a coach once who said, like, why do you keep expecting people to honor the boundaries that you set when you don't honor those boundaries? And it really changed the game for me. So I was like, okay, I need to start with me, and then it needs to trickle out to family and, my intimate relationships. And it was hardest with family. Family tends to be like, well, we're a family, or I'm your mother, or I'm your uncle, or I'm this, or you still have to honor these boundaries. You don't have to like them, but I am requiring that you honor them. And that goes vice versa. I consider myself as a boundary honorer, even if it's like, oh, that's tough, but it's your boundary and I love you and I want to be in a relationship with you. And so I will honor your boundary. So it's really about this reciprocity and kindness and grace and understanding and compassion. And I feel like if people looked at it more from that lens, it would be less offensive. The boundary would be less offensive because it's like, okay, this is what makes this person that I love or that I care for or that I work with feel safe, seen, and supported. Yep. How can I do my part there? Because that's all we all want, right? Is to feel those three things. Sometimes boundaries are challenging. I know they were challenging with, my family, because you don't ever want to like be disrespectful or step on anyone's toes and all of that. But like, if we cannot be in healthy relationship, that's going to not only really hurt my mental health, but it's going to hurt our relationship. So why don't we just try to honor each other's boundaries and meet each other where we are?
I love that so much, Alex. I do think that it's when people understand that boundaries are really the bridges to better relationships and not the blocks. There's so many myths around boundaries and there's so much fear. And what it really is as simple as what you just described, the mutuality of caring about the other people and how they feel. That's it. Like, you don't have to agree with my boundary, but if you want to be in a relationship with me, you actually do have to care about the way that I feel, and I will do the same for you. Right? That's the mutuality, where I think that in these imbalance, you were saying that as you sort of got to this level of evolution, your relationships went up. The ones that were great got better. The ones that were not equitable or whatever it was that didn't make them work kind of naturally fell away because not everyone is willing to have reciprocal boundaries. Not everyone is willing or capable. Also, if I was being more gracious to others, I would say they're not capable of sort of having this conversation about emotions and feelings, and because there's so many people who don't know a feeling from a Frankfurter. I mean, that's still a thing where people have no friggin' idea,
Yes.
I wanted to ask you about something. You talk about something that I think is really powerful, which is about rewriting our story. So can you share a little bit, either your own journey, or I know that you teach writing and you teach healing in writing. So just talk about that if you would.
I think it's really important for us to own our stories. And I think it's also important and valuable for us to choose to do things differently and rewrite those stories. A lot of times I feel like we as human beings are conditioned to keep things that do not belong to us. I often tell my clients, empty out that emotional suitcase, sort it out. What has to go? What can stay? We are packing light emotionally, right? What is serving you and what is no longer aligned? And be honest with yourself on the page about what and how you want to live a life that is rooted in your truth, not your parents' truth, not your spouse's or your children's, yours. And also, it goes back to kind of that conversation we were having earlier about whose voice is this? Is this even in your voice? Does this story even belong to you? If the answer is, I don't know, put it to the side. If the answer is no, take it out and toss it.
Yeah. Seriously, because other people's fear and limitations and projection and their own self-loathing, if you have parents who never healed their own stuff, again, like you said, in this book, it isn't just about healing self. It's such an impactful and important part of what you're teaching folks is that you can spare the next generation. You can set them up to be so much more joyful and so much more productive if that's what they want to be, or creative, or whatever the thing is that is their heart's desire, by you healing yourself. That gift you've already given your daughters, right? Because you've been in process for so long. And that modeled behavior, the same behavior that we talked about at the top, that we see unhealthy modeled behavior, and we're like, oh, I guess that's the way relationships are. Seeing the grown-ups, the adults in their lives, children go, oh, this is how I problem solve. I write, I go to workshops, I read books, I go to therapy, and it's okay to not have all the answers. Yeah. Where I just don't feel like it. This is a different way of parenting that you're describing.
Mm-hmm. And again, I didn't have anyone modeling healthy regulation, healthy love to me. I just didn't. And it's interesting now, my mother and I have deeply healed our relationship, which, feels really great. And also, it took a lot of time, because when people are not willing to see themselves, it is so challenging to be in relationship. And something that I realized is the healing that I'm doing is healing our lineage, but it's also healing our ancestors, and the people before me. And I see my mom and my grandmother taking their baby steps and thinking about what the past looks like for them, what it feels like in their bodies, what are they holding that's not theirs. Like, me and my mom have been having a lot of conversations about fear and why she lived a lot of her life rooted in fear. And it's because of the projections from my grandmother, and my grandmother learned that from her mother. And so it's like, how do we dismantle these certain behaviors? It's by addressing them, not by turning away from them. And it took me and my mom a really long time to get to a point where it was like, to see each other as women and not just mother and daughter, which completely shifted how we healed together. She often says that I inspire her to heal, to change, to grow. And at first, when I was in my healing, that was really hard for me. I was like, but because I'm the one, why do I have to be the one leading the way, right? But now I really look at it as this gift. I give her grace and myself grace. Like, if I had to be the one to start the healing, then so be it. Because I'm looking at my almost 15-year-old, and she is a kick-ass kid. She's amazing. She's sensitive. She's compassionate. She's kind. She's honest. I look at my 4-year-old who takes deep breaths when she gets too fired up. I look at my 3-year-old who's like, okay, Isla. Okay, Isla is the middle child, the 4-year-old. She'll go, okay, Isla, it's okay to cry. You're my best friend. Let's breathe. So like,
and I'm crying.
And it's just like, there's the healing. There is the healing. Because me and my husband model what it means to not only love ourselves, but to love each other and to choose each other.
Yeah. Oh my God, I have chills, like head to toe, like that. Just picturing those two little faces, the loving and the caring. It's so beautiful to see it in actual real life. Like, you're looking at it in real time. Like, wow, this is happening right now. Okay, so tell everyone where we can pre-order your book right now. I already did. I knew you're going to be going on a book tour. So tell folks where they can pre-order the book, and let's talk about where you're going to be.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. alexl.com has all the links. You can also pre-order, of course, on Amazon, at bookshop.org, your local indie bookstore. If they don't have the book at your local indie bookstore, please request it and they will
Yes,
buy
please.
it, and they will, we're supporting local and indie. Anywhere books are sold is where you can find the book. Yeah. I'm going on tour in November, and where will I be?
Well, we got your dates. I know you're going to be in New York. You're going to be
Mm-hmm.
in, I think, on the 8th of November. You're going to be in Cali. You said on the 13th.
Yep.
I know you're going to be in Philly as well. I might try to hit the Philly show. I really hope that it's so incredibly successful. You guys watching, listening, all the information of where you can order the book, pre-order the book, go support this book, support your independent bookstores. But this is really important. Pre-sales are really important for authors. So if you think you want to get the book anyway, why don't you get it now? Because that makes the author look really good to the publisher, which is what we would like to do if we're really going to be supportive. All right,
Right.
I have one last question for you, which
Yes.
is personally, what has been your most challenging boundary struggle and how did you overcome it?
Oh, my most challenging boundary struggle has been stopping working when I say I'm going to stop working. It's really hard for me because I love my job and I can be on email and calls all day. And my husband actually brought it to my attention. He was like, "You work from the time you get out of the bed until the time everyone in this house is asleep. And that is not working for you. And it's not working for me. And it's not working for us." And he was like, "You need boundaries." He was like, "I know you love your job, but you need boundaries." And so now I have better boundaries with work. I have work hours, and I do not work on Mondays and Fridays anymore. So there we go.
Oh my God, I love it. Me either.
I'm proud of us.
I am too. Because I'd rather bang it out Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That is amazing. Because it is so hard when you're passionate to not be consumed, especially when you have a book. Like everything seems urgent, So that is a beautiful boundary to master. So congratulations to you. Congratulations on the book. Thank you so much for spending time with us. I
Thank
so
you.
appreciate your work in the world and what you're doing. Please keep doing what you're doing, and we will have to do this again sometime.
Anytime, Terry. Thank you so much for having me.